in this picture?
Oh, maybe 35, 40. I'm just guessing. I don't have any real name like that.
Okay. We've looked at her photo, and you say, where did she work?
She worked for the C.H. Musselman canning factory in Biggerville. And some of my relatives and neighbors also worked for them. They had a factory in Idaville, which is nearby. And Bertha Jane Beamer, and she had me when she was 18 years old, I think. I have to nail that down, but I was born in July, and she would have been 19 the following month, on the 31st. Rather coincidence. Mary Ann was born on my mother's birthday, 31st of August.
So they shared the same birthday.
They shared the same birthday. Rather interesting. But she was a good woman. She worked hard. She had rheumatic fever as a young girl, and it left her with a breathing difficulty all her life that I knew her.
It also impaired your heart. It causes,
You mean my heart?
her heart.
Her heart, oh.
Yeah, it damages the heart. My mother, they discovered that she must have had it. She never knew it. And my grandfather probably died prematurely because he had it as well. And it does certain damage to the valves of the heart. And it not only affects you when you're older. A lot of people, they would get it and they'd never be aware of it.
You're talking about Helen?
Yeah.
And your grandfather, the magician?
Yes.
What do you know?
Yep. So it looks like tonight you came prepared to play a few tunes.
I would like to play When You Were a Tulip, and it's sort of a triad of three little tunes that weave together. It's a cute little one.
Now you want to do that in the piano, or you want to do it on the guitar?
On the guitar, but
Okay.
Several others I like to do on the piano.
Okay.
Which do you want to do first?
Why don't we do the guitar number?
Okay.
You want to do it?
When You Were a Tulip. And your challenge is to figure out where the one song ends and the other one begins. It's a trio of them. I guess I did tell you when we chatted earlier that the first guitar I had cost me 75 cents from my uncle, my mother's brother. When you wore a tulip, a bright yellow tulip, and I wore a big red rose. When you caressed me, 'twas then heaven bless me, what a blessing no one knows. You made life cheery when you called me dearie, 'twas down where the bluegrass grows. Your lips were sweeter than julep when you wore a tulip, and I wore a big red rose. How sweet you looked that day in your simple gingham gown. To me you were as lovely as a queen. From underneath your bonnet peeped a pair of golden curls and the bluest eyes that I have ever seen. Your lips were red as cherries, but they tasted twice as sweet It only took a kiss to make our happiness complete. Oh, we were picking berries at old Aunt Mary's when I picked a blushing bride. As we rode home together, I just wondered whether I could win you forever if I tried. At love's suggestion, I popped the question and asked you to be mine. From your kisses, I knew you picked me when I picked you in berry picking time. There you got all three of them together.
Good.
Those are old time songs. They're fun.
What else do you have there?
I have my saws.
Yeah, why don't we do something with the saw?
I can play a number or so on the saw. And your sister-in-law, Mary Elizabeth, saw me carrying my old musical saws in an old guitar case. So last year, she created this carrying case. It was a surprise. She told me quite a while before Christmas, she says, you're getting a Christmas present that perhaps you don't know anybody else having one just like it. And we're going to keep you guessing what it is. But anyway, she designed this thing with Velcro fasteners, room for 3 saws, and room for several bows to play the saws with. And I think I was so thrilled to get this as a present. And in our previous chit-chat, I think I had told you that I went to garage sales and flea markets and accumulated 2 guitar cases filled with saws. But I carry these 3 around because they're adequate. And this is the only one that I almost went over my $10 limit. This one was Danny at Wilhelm's Hardware. I think this was originally priced at about 12 bucks. And I was visiting his hardware store one day, and I said, Danny, could I see if there's any music in any of your saws up there? And he said, yeah, go ahead. So I took the saw out of the case and found that with my knuckles I could make a few tunes on it. But the price was 12 bucks, and I said, well, Danny, I would buy it, but I sort of years ago told myself I wasn't going to spend more than 10 bucks for a saw. He says, where's your 10 bucks? So I got a prompt discount, and I acquired this saw. It's the only new one I bought in my hobby of playing saws. And I think I may have mentioned this before. If I didn't pay more than $10 for a saw, I guess I'd have to limit myself with the bows. But I finally decided I would want a bow that had more hair than a regular fiddle bow, like your wife uses when she's going to the concert like tonight. So anyway, I discovered that Bob Kane up here in Campbelltown had this bass fiddle bow, and he had just rebuilt it, reconditioned it. And I saw it, and I says, what's the price in that? He says, 20 bucks. So that's the only time I went over my maximum of $10. I paid $20 for this bow, and of course I like it. Anyway, it's fun, Daniel, when you're doing all your carpentry work. I realize you got power saws out there, but just for fun you might try to make a tune on your hand saws. Anyway, the secret in these hand saws, in playing them, there's a couple little secrets, and I share these with people because I like to get somebody interested in playing a saw. And the idea is to put the handle of the saw between your knees and lift your right foot up on the toes and your heel off the floor and make your leg be nervous so it gives you a vibrato, and then put your thumb on the end of the saw, and then put your fingers underneath it and bend the saw in a reverse S. That's the secret of getting a tune out of a saw. So let's see if I can get a tune. My country 'tis of thee.
Pretty good. I recognize it.
On a handsaw.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't believe it, you can believe it now.
And if it's appropriate, I play a couple tunes on the piano, and that'll include all three instruments here.
You're not gonna try one of your other saws?
Oh, I could, but this one is my old masterpiece.
That's your master.
Yeah, I may have explained this before. When I picked up these saws in yard sales and flea markets and garage sales, I would decide how good they were, and if they had a little music, I would put with my felt marker 1 star on the handle. And different ones have different number of stars, but this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. This is the only one that has 5 stars on it, so that's my old Pro. And this was by the Henry Diston Company, and it was established in 1840, I guess it is, long before the Civil War. And it says, for beauty, finish, and so forth, this saw cannot be excelled. Henry Diston. And that was a company in Philadelphia. Of course, they may have branches now. But anyway, it's a fun thing, and I'd like to see some of my friends, especially my son-in-law and anyone else music inclined, to pick up a saw, and you can take your knuckles and as a starter. You don't do as well with the...
Does much better with the bow.
Does much better with the bow. Of course, you can take the eraser of your pencil if you got a pencil handy. With a pencil eraser.
Mm-hmm.
You used to be able to buy these Scripto pencils for 10 cents. Now you have to pay over $1 for them. At least 10 times what I paid for them when I was a kid in high school. And of course you can go one step better than the eraser on your pencil with a discard from a automobile repair shop or tire repair shop. This is the valve from an automobile tire, an extension, a couple extensions, and the valve cap, and that does a fairly good job. So if you can't afford a $20 bow, you can use these. I've been a song similar to Stephen Foster, and it's called Old Black Joe. Gone are the days when my heart was young and gay. And so the song goes. Yeah, Old Black Joe.
Well, how about if we move over to the piano?
Okay, and I used to pick out tunes with one finger. When I entertain old folks and the handicapped in these nursing homes, they ask me, how do I play without music? And how did I get started? And I said, this is how I got started, and eventually you add 2 fingers, 3 fingers, and then the left hand. And then that same tune with Paul Kuhn variation sounds like this. Gray, they have taken you away, and I'll never see my darling anymore. We will float down the river in our little red canoe, fare thee well to the old Kentucky shore. Okay, this is a tune written by a lady who lived to be just about 95 years old, and she was blind since she was 6 weeks old.
Her name was Fannie Mae.
That's right. She had a friend in England. They never met as far as I know, but they communicated by phone or letter or whatever. And this was a song that her friend in England wrote. Frances Ridley Havergal was the name of that lady in England, and she lived to be only about half of Fanny Crosby's age. In fact, she died almost about the same age as my mother and my father and my stepfather. Frances Ridley Havergal. Anyway, since I was in the Army Air Corps, in the Air Force, in the National Guard, and your brother-in-law Dwight was in the Navy, A couple military songs. Honoring Dwight, the Navy song. I think I got the Air Force song. The Air Force song. That's Anchors Away, the Navy song. Okay, this is a song you should sing to your wife every day. This is a fun one. This is the name of a state in this song. See if you can tell me what it was. Is.
Virginia.
Marching Through Georgia.
Georgia.
And this is the one I wrote about your mother-in-law, somewhere between 1950 and 56 when I was at State College. I went down to the music store on Main Street and bought some music and wrote the words, and simple music to it. And it's called Good Night, My Dear. Two more, and then I guess I call it quits. A Wonderful Savior. And the last one, the greatest one of them all. Your Japanese piano's in pretty good shape. Okay, Daniel. Your father-in-law loves to do this sort of thing.
If you could just maybe do a number on your guitar, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be shooting this picture of you. When so if you provide the background music for me, I'll start shooting the picture for the number. Anything?
My grandfather's clock was too large for the shelf, so it stood 90 years on the floor. It was bought on the morning of the day that he was born, and it shared both his joy life and his joy. It was bought on the morn of the day that he was born. It was always his treasure and pride, but it stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died. 90 years without slumbering. life's seconds numbering. It stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died. In watching its pendulum spring to and fro, many hours had he spent while a boy. And in childhood and manhood the clock seemed to go, and it shared both his grief and his joy. It struck 24 when he entered at the door with a blooming and beautiful bride. But it stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died. My grandfather said that of those he could hire, not a servant so faithful he found, for it wasted no time and had but one desire, at the close of each week to be wound. Still it stayed in its place, not a frown upon its face. Its hands never hung by its side, but it stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died. It struck an alarm in the stillness of the night, an alarm that for years had been numb. Then we knew that his spirit was yearning for flight, that the hour for departure had come. Still it kept up the time with a soft and muffled chime, as we silently stood by his side. But it stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died. 90 years without slumbering, tick-tock, his life's seconds numbering. It stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died.
Very good.
I wish all of my kids could sing that. I used to sing it to them when they were little. Grandfather's Clock. Well, we did the saw, we did the piano.
So when you look at that picture, that young fellow there with the guitar around his neck, did you ever wonder what happened to him?
I don't wonder, I pretty well know. The Lord has blessed him with a wealth of friends, fairly good health down through the years, and we may have mentioned this summer I'll be 80 years old, and a lot of people don't get to be 80. And with a few minor aches and pains that I can live with, I'm extremely grateful. I'm a very lucky old man. I have 4 daughters and 1 son, nice son-in-laws. One of them sitting there.
Yeah, don't.
And one grandson.
Don't let that information get behind enemy lines.
Yeah. And 1 granddaughter right now, in part of her 6 years of service with the explosive ordnance disposal over in a little country called Qatar, which is a little peninsula jutting out from Saudi Arabia in the Persian Gulf. Her job is to clear landmines and bombs where the enemy may have planted them. Hopefully the good Lord will protect her so that when she does that job in Afghanistan or wherever, he will keep her safe. She's planning to come home, by the way.
Yeah, I heard the news.
5 days after my birthday. My birthday's on the 11th of July when I'll be 80, and 5 days later on the 16th she plans to be here. And she already put in a request for the use of your mother-in-law's little 1985 Volkswagen convertible. She says, I want the use of that for 30 days. That's how long my leave back to America will be. And she says, I have a friend down in Baltimore, and I want to get down there and see her. And of course, this is her transportation.
Sure.
So we plan to get a new top for it down in Mannheim from the specialist so that it won't be damp inside the convertible when it rains. And the engine has had a tune-up, and we're very thrilled that she's coming home. And we'll have a vehicle for her. So anyway, Dan, there's life wrapped up in a nutshell. I did tell you.
If I asked you to clear your mind,
yes,
just clear your mind of the music, clear your mind of all the discussions that we had. What is the most important thing to Paul Kuhn right now in this stage of your life? For instance, if we suddenly discovered that this room was running out of air and we couldn't leave the room, I understand that the most important thing to us would be to acquire an air supply, and rather quickly. There's certain things, urgencies in all of our lives. It might be urgent that you get your cars inspected, or it might be urgent that you pay a bill, or it might be urgent that you see someone in the hospital. What I'm looking for, what I'm going after is, in general, when basically everything's right with the world, in your world. There are no emergencies, there are no daily routines to take care of, there isn't somebody in foreign lands in harm's way. All things are good with the world. When you're not focused on one of those naturally crisis things, what's the most important thing to you?
I suppose my impromptu answer would be, what could I do to make life a little more pleasant and cheerful for anybody around me, be they relatives, neighbors, friends? And I don't consider that I have any enemies. Even those guys over in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda and their buddies. I wouldn't mind if they were sitting here and we were able to discuss with them how things could be different and how they could be persuaded to consider a better way of spending their lives and to persuading 16-year-old girls to blow themselves up, as has been done. A girl was about to be married, I understand. Her wedding was close by, and they persuaded her to put a bomb around. That's in Palestine, the terrorists. Mm-hmm. And she strapped a bomb on herself and went into a bus or a shopping center and whatever, and killed herself and a whole lot of other people. So
you think if people in general, all people, would wake up in the morning and start thinking about the things that they might do during the course of the day as they interact with other people to try to make their life more pleasant, the world would be
a better world,
a
better country, a better community in which I live, and a better home, if possible, home life. It bothers me to see married couples overwhelmed by disagreements so that they end their marriages. That bothers me. I wish if Daniel Mudich and Paul Kuhn and his friends can get a book together, A Better World, there'll be a chapter in there, how we can resolve little differences so that we don't have to be annihilated from anybody. I'm a dreamer. I'm an optimist. The old saying, accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and don't mess around in between. I believe our health will be better. I believe our life might be enriched. We might live longer if we had more positive attitude and dwelt more with the good things in life, what we can do to better life. So I would stick to that.
One time I asked the question, and I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this in your life, but I was alone in the car, and the question was, what is it that fulfills us? You know, it's kind of a deep question, but the answer that I got back was, it's not what we take from this world that's going to bring us happiness, but it's what we are able to give that will truly bring us true happiness.
You must have heard that quote. It's not what you take, but what you give that measures
No,
the worth of the life you live.
This is something that just came to me. I was driving in the car down the backcountry roads here, and probably Louser Road, and that's the thought that jumped to my mind, and I was just trying to affirm that that's kind of what, on the basis of what you said, it sounds something very similar.
We were talking earlier about the big wheels in Hershey Foods, and I guess this would apply to a lot of other corporations. I think of Anderson and
Enron?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Anderson.
great financial fiasco. If the people in power could ask themselves exactly what you asked when you were riding along in the car, what can I give? Not what can I take from other people? How can I deprive other people? What can I give? So rather than these executives putting the pressure on the board of directors to get $500,000 or whatever, and then depriving the little worker, the janitor, of his retirement benefits, that should be a no-no. What can I give? Not what can I take, what can I grab, but what can I give that make life a little bit better for those around us, whether they be friends, relatives, spouses, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, our next-door neighbors. As I say, I like to think that I don't have any enemies, because I'd like to turn anyone who might want to be my enemy into my friend.
Well, as you might have guessed, we're getting into some of the more deeper and more philosophical questions.
More people should do this.
Never taking ourselves too seriously, but just remembering it's an exchange of some philosophy. My next question is, people say I have a faith in God. Most people say that they have a faith in God, unless, of course, they're an atheist. To people, that means a lot of different things. There are certainly the pat answers that they're taught in Sunday school and in church, and I think most of us that when we belong to a congregation of that sort, no matter what whether it be a Lutheran or a Baptist or Catholic or whatever it happens to be, we tend to give the answers that are expected, the answers that are taught. This is what I believe, and everybody kind of murmurs the same. This is the answer, because this is what we learned, and if somebody if they say something, then there's a certain response expected, and we do that kind of like monolithic followers, if you will, all having the one same mind. I personally don't believe that is the case at all. I've been able, I think, to cross over barriers with people, and for whatever reason, they are willing to share some of their most inner thoughts on the subject, and they don't feel threatened by it. They don't feel threatened that if they tell me what they really think is, going to hurt them or haunt them. So my question to you is, as truth as you can, without giving the answer that you know should be you've learned the response, but the answer that may be within you, and when you think about it and you say to yourself, this is what Paul Kuhn believes in, this is what I think is kind of, to me, amassing almost 80 years, this is kind of what I've figured out, and this is what I think that it is. And basically, the question is, what is your faith in God in that respect?
I'm glad you asked that. If your eyes are better than mine, right down here, there's a little statement, 4 words.
In God we trust.
And right here on the dime, I think, is the same thing.
Yep.
And I'm not exactly sure about this, but I think Abraham Lincoln may have persuaded the Congress, the senators, our government to put that statement on our coins. And I so much wish that anybody who picks up a quarter or a dime and whatever, take the time to look at that statement. We used to be called a godly nation. Forget about there being Muslims and Jews and Methodists and Lutherans and so forth, but godly. If we believe that God created all things, and my mind is too remote from the scientific masters who understand these things. I can't conceive how he could have done this, but in my simplicity, I like to believe that a simple faith in the goodness. I like to believe there's a little good in everybody, even the worst scoundrel in jail, the murderer, the thief. I like to think there's a little good in each of us. And if we would spend more time trying to develop what good traits we do have and could diminish the other things, there's an old statement, resist the devil, he will flee. And I realize that's pretty hard because I have my faults and most people do.
That's odd that you bring that up. Do you truly believe that the devil made you do it, or do you think Paul Kuhn made those choices, the good ones as well as the bad ones, or do you really think there was another force and you're not guilty of anything? That other force got you to do it.
That's a good question, Daniel. I think almost everybody has a choice. In most things in life, we have a choice. We can be positive or we can be negative. And the devil may have suggested things, but we could listen and we could choose to believe him and be devilish in our thinking and our action. Or we could remember the 4-word statement on those coins, in God we trust. I'd rather put my trust in God than in the devil. And I'd like to make the rest of my life adherent to those 4 words, in God we trust. I'd like to live a life, Daniel, if I can make it to 92, that would be twice the lifespan of my mother and my father and my stepfather. I'd like people more and more to remember a few good things that I do, and I'd like to try to diminish the negativism that could creep into my life. I'd like to be a good example of what a grandfather, what a father, what a father-in-law should be, what a good neighbor should be. That is a challenge I would wish to keep with me the rest of my life. How can I be a better person? And we talked about a better world, and I challenge you to begin a composition in your computer, gathering all the ideas you can to make it a better world. And a better world perhaps should start within every person's alive in each city, each county, each township, each state, each country.
Do you think over the course of your life, and you've been involved in certainly different organizations that involve religion as a child, when you grew up you probably went to different Sunday schools, and then as an adult I know you used to go to the Lutheran church.
Baptized when I was 12 years old.
Yeah. Later you went to the Free Church, and do you think that they all are equally in their own way trying to kind of seek a nicer, more sharing, more giving, trying to reach out and teach better values to people in their own ways?
Yes, I believe that. Whether they're Mormons, whether they're Seventh-day Adventists, I think there's positivism in each one of them.
Jewish people, is it?
Yes, oh yes, yes. I think there's goodness there in all of them. And like I say, if we could stress the good traits in our lives and try to diminish the negative traits, I think when we were chit-chatting before, I told you the story when I was a youngster, teenager, stealing watermelons from the watermelon patch of my father's friend. We had a choice as kids whether we'd go in that man's watermelon patch, and the man later told us, he says, if you'd have come to my house and been honest about it, he says, I'd have given you a watermelon, but here you steal, you made a bunch of thieves out of yourselves. But I think we have the potential. In most situations in life, we have a choice. The executives in Hershey Foods have a choice. They can bulge their pockets with the wealth of the company and remove some of the retirement benefits from the janitors and people up through the ranks. They could do good. They could stress positive things and try to be the best CEOs that they could be, the best vice presidents that they could be, the best members of the board that they could be. I'm an undying optimist, Daniel. I think there's tremendous potential.
So would you the last time you were here, you and I read some interesting literature on deism as an example.
Yes.
My impression is you didn't find any of that objectionable, that the ideology and a lot of the things behind it, along with the history of not just Christianity, but most organized religions have a long, bloody history of power and ruthlessness, and basically, especially in the early days, it was about men finding a way to gain power over people and using God as the muscle to gain that power. I sense that your thought is that men that seek to do good, regardless of their religious affiliation, whether it be Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, that the God that truly was the architect of the universe and this planet has the wisdom to be able to separate them out.
Yes, yes. Well put, well put. Well put.
It's not locked in reciting a couple verses in any particular book, and then from that day forward you've gained the key and you've got entry because it was reciting a verse and now you belong to the club. Okay. If only it were that simple. But
like I told you just earlier,
I and this tape, as I told you before, you may decide that you don't want this tape viewed for a long time to come. I mean, it's a private thing. It depends how you want it handled.
Hopefully I didn't say anything in our conversation that I...
No, you did. There's some things that we discussed and that I think would disappoint some people.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. What I was going to say is...
Doesn't disappoint me, but...
Yeah, what I was going to say is I hopefully didn't say things that I thought were contrary to my understanding of life and the best that's obtainable. Whether it agrees with everybody else's opinion or not, I don't know. I think of two things that come to my mind. I mentioned that Monday I was thrilled to have been given a certificate of graduation from my studies with the Frank Lobach Literacy Council. And 1 week later, this coming Monday, I will meet my first student, who is a man from Pakistan, about 35 years old, and he can speak some English. I never met him, but I will meet him about 12, 15. And he needs to learn how to read, and my challenge is to help him to learn to read.
Well, let me give you a clue.
Let's hear it.
If he says, "I want to fly airliner, don't need to know how to land," you got a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Hands.
Yes, yes.
On a more serious note, what plans do you have for the future? What kind of things are you kind of thinking about and wanting to do over the next several months, several weeks, several years?
I have partially an answer. I have two people in hospitals that I want to visit, and one of them is connected with your family. The grandmother that's now in Elizabethtown in the Masonic home. I did visit her once when she was in a Hershey Medical Center, and it was a very pleasant get-together, and I want to visit her again. If I don't make it this week, I certainly want to next week. And then there's a black man in the Hershey Medical Center in intensive care. And since I'm the chaplain of the Hershey VFW, it's my job and my challenge to visit people who are sick, who are in hospital or invalids in home and so forth. People who are down and out and need to be cheered up. Whatever a chaplain should do, that I would like to do. And as long as I have the health, and as long as the VFW wants to continue me as their chaplain, I would like to do that sort of thing. And starting Monday, tutoring people who hadn't learned to read. I'd like to continue that. And of course, I've been visiting nursing homes. I've told you that. Several homes over in Middletown. I've gone to Hummelstown, and even Mayor Alexander was one of the audience when I entertained people there. And I've been to as far east as Bethel, Pennsylvania, and a father and son banquet, and Campbelltown Nursing Home, and Palmyra Nursing Home. I've made my rounds, and I think as long as the Lord feels there's some merit to that activity, I'd like to continue doing that. And of course, if I think I've run out of things to do, your mother-in-law has flower beds all around the house, and they need mulching and they need weed pulling. I would rather wear out than to rust out, doing things that will be helpful and pleasing to other people. It's about as simply as I can put it.
Well, here's another question, and I think it's a deep question. In general, just in general to the world, if you were going to write your own obituary, just kind of in general, how do you want to be remembered?
The guy who wanted to do good He tried to do good. He didn't succeed in all the good he could have done. But he has tried, and he would like to continue trying until his very last day.
Okay, for trying not to be redundant, what message would you like to give to that same audience?
Live in peace. Live in peace with everyone around you, everyone with whom you could communicate, whether it be by email, telephone, movies, however.
Now this is going to be tougher. Now we're going to get real tough.
Okay.
If the music was playing and we were smelling the flowers and we're in a room full of a lot of people that you know, and this is your special time because you've passed over, they're there paying your last respects, giving condolences to the family that you're gone now, and the people you left behind, and we'll start with your oldest. What would you like to say to your daughter Liz? You are gone now, and is there any words that you could say to kind of let her understand that it's okay?
I guess the simple thing I would say is she has followed in my footsteps in so many ways. She became a teacher. She got her college training, California State College in Pennsylvania. She could be teaching in a public school right now, but she chose to teach in a church school because she felt that even though she'd be earning much less money, God called her, she felt, to teach in this church school north of Lebanon. And I guess I would tell her, if I could wink my eye after I died, and when she was looking at me in the casket, I'd say, continue, Liz, doing the things that you think are the most worthwhile things you could be doing, whether as a husband, as a wife, as a mother, as a teacher, or whatever. And of course, she is the teacher in the Tuesday night Bible study at our home, and I'm proud of her for spending the time there. I did read the Bible through a few times, but Liz could show me up and make me feel very insignificant with her knowledge and mastery of the Bible. So I'm proud of her achievement. Going down the line, your wife came next, and I guess I can't be more thrilled and proud when I sit in the big auditorium up at Milton Hershey and listen to Paula play her violin with the Central Pennsylvania Symphony. I come down here with my pooches, and she can bathe the dogs, she trims their hair, she cuts their nails, she polishes their teeth. What an achievement. What an achievement. And in addition, she earns some income to the family. I go to Dwight in a tech center at Hershey Foods. He's in charge of heating, air conditioning, ventilation. He surpassed me in so many ways. He was in the Navy during the Vietnam War. He has a lot of fine memories, and I'm thrilled for his accomplishments. I'd say, Dwight, keep doing the good things you know how to do. Even to this day, he's very mechanically inclined. He had 2 or 3 years in the auto body, as you had years in the electric shop. I'd say, keep doing the best things you've learned, the best you can do. And going down to Paula, Julie out in Akron, Ohio, who is a CPA, got a degree from Penn State. With her only one child, but her love for people and helping people. Let's see. Julie, hang in there. Do the thing that you've learned best to do. And Verna with her music
Hold on
and
a
her
second.
horses.
Hold that thought here. Stop it.
Yo-ho! Hi, Sammy!
What did you?
Fell in love with horses when she was a little girl, and she still is in love with horses, exemplified by the fact that she works at Penn National Racetrack taking care of horses. And of course, that love that she had in horses rubbed off on Christina, our granddaughter who lives next door, and she has 3 horses out in the back of our place. And I'm proud of her in the fact that she works and earns money to pay for the feed and the blacksmith to take care of these horses. And she gets up early in the morning, sometimes it seems before the sun gets up, to feed them before she goes out to the racetrack. And then she goes to school later, and then after school she again goes to the racetrack and takes care of horses. So industry, a special interest. I'm very thrilled. And of course we have 11 grandchildren, and Sammy is the first great-grandchild, and we're very thrilled that we lived long enough to see one great-grandchild come into the world and be such a blessing. So you're a grandfather, Daniel, and eventually maybe Sammy will be the father of the first great-grandchild you'll have. Something for you to look forward to.
I initially thought I was going to have to go into therapy because the thought of having to go to bed with a grandmother was affecting me.
That's cute. Go to bed with a grandmother.
But I shortly got over that, and I didn't need the therapy afterwards.
Yeah, that's cute. That's cute. What a blessing they can be. What a blessing they can be.
So all in all, do you think you've had a pretty good trip?
Yes, the Lord has blessed me more than I deserve. People ask me, Daniel, constantly, and I'm aware of this more as time goes on. They say, if they haven't seen me for a while, they say, well, how are things going, Paul Kuhn? And I says, better than I deserve to have them be. And I truly believe that. I haven't deserved, I haven't earned all the blessings that I enjoy. I mentioned this before. Marianne and I will have been married 52 years. We never bought a new car in all those 52 years, but somehow the Lord manages to keep these old jalopies running. And they do the same basic thing that a Rolls Royce would do. They take you and they bring you. And that's really all that we expect from our old jalopies. We long since gave up the idea of trying to keep up the Joneses with a wealthy guy who might live next door.
Your statement about the good Lord reminded me of a young fellow that was he bought a property that was run down, and there's a lot of small trees had grown up in the lawn, and it was very overrun for probably about 10 years. Nobody cared for the property. And it was in Lancaster County. And an old Amish fellow came by in a horse and buggy every day, and he watched this young lad, after he'd get home from work, toil on this property for about 5 years. And he had new siding on the house, and it was painted, and he restored a lot of the old carpenter work with the real fancy designs under the porches, and he really completed the house, and he'd gone out in the lawn, and he did a lot of shrubbery work, and he had new grass planted, and there was a nice wall around the property that he had repointed. I mean, the place really looked great. And he had been putting up a new mailbox, and in fact the whole property was complete except for that. And on this particular day, after 5 years, the Amishman had never really spoken to the young fella. He stopped his horse and buggy. He said, "Young fella," he said, "you and the Lord have done great things with this property." And the young fellow looked at him for a minute, and he thought, he said, Yes, we have, he said, but you should have seen it when God took care of it by himself.
Really? That's cute. That's cute. I never heard that one done that way.
I thought that was appropriate with your car repairs.
Yes, yes.
I've seen cars in their state of repair when God took care of them all by himself. Most of them were sitting in these places waiting for somebody to need a part off of them.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's good that you take comfort in the fact that you've lived a good life. I think over the last several years, a lot of people have heard me say that when they ask me how things are going, they usually get the same response. And I usually tell them life just gets better and better every single day.
Yeah.
And they're not sure what to do with that. I guess they kind of used to people telling them what's wrong in their life.
Yeah.
So I would guess on this day that people would be getting together and paying their last respects. You would want them to be more lighthearted and to feel good in that they can share this time with the family and reflect on the life that you've lived and understand that you lived a good life and a full life, and you feel that that you have been blessed and you've had a lot of opportunities to have the good things in life, and you've made those choices.
I most likely gave you one of those before. My father-in-law, Harvey Moyer Hershey, brought me into the Lions Club in the early part of 1950, and I have been associated with delivering wheelchairs and crutches and canes and hospital beds and portable potties for over half a century. And that is one of the things, if the Lord gives me strength and good health, I would like to continue, because I'm doing something for somebody else, somebody in need.
Who do you suppose is going to pick up the torch? You think Dwight will pick up the torch for you?
Could be. He's storing a lot of things in the end of his barn.
Yeah.
He could very well do that.
You'd like to see him do that?
Yes, yes. And of course, the other gentleman whose name on there is Pete Villa, who was a metallurgist for a steel company, Bethlehem Steel. And he's in the Lions Club, and I thrill with his knowledge of science and how the ingredients that go into iron and steel and so forth. And of course, titanium came along. And I ask questions, and he gives answers, and he's on our committee. And it's just a thrill to do this sort of thing. It's not a money-making situation. We lend this equipment without charge. People may donate when they're through with things, but they don't have to, and I like that. There again, back to your philosophy a while ago, it's not what you take, but what you give that measures the worth of the life you live. It's not taking, getting. It's what can I give to make
the
it
answer.
better.
The answer that I got is that it was going to be what I give is what's going to bring me the most happiness, not what I take.
Yes, yes.
So there was definitely something in it for me. I know we kind of basically at the end of this interview, but another question did come to mind. Here a couple weeks ago, we were both made aware that a house affair can be such a terrible thing.
Yes.
And we both know and have friends that are in the hospital, still somewhat battling for their lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're not sure how this is all going to turn out. But it does make you think, if unfortunately your home would burn down to the ground, that there wasn't one blessed thing left. There wasn't a picture, a camera, a watch, a guitar, a stitch of clothing, but somehow through some miracle, not a person, we're talking about an article here. One thing, one possession could survive the fire, and it only survived because you discover somehow it got moved into the garage or into a car, depending how big this item is. What item would you hope to come find in your car or in the garage that was spared?
That's a good question. That's a good question. It would be insignificant in meaning to most other people, but if I remember correctly, up in our attic is a lard can, metal, of course, and I think it is mostly filled with V-mail letters that my mother received from me when I was in India. When I wrote a letter to my mother, they didn't actually send the letters. They took them to an electronic gadget and took a picture of it, and they sent it, the tape, the film, over to the United States, and then they took the film and made reproductions of my letter. They were V-mails, and I think this lard can is pretty well filled, dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of letters that I've written to my mother in those 3 years, 43, 44, 45. That's just something out of the past that would be nice to save and give each of my kids and their spouses and grandchildren a copy of Bertha Heller's letters that she got from her only son in the service in World War II. That's just a thought that comes to my mind. It would be something very unusual. As for material things,
we need to hook you up with one of the state-of-the-art scanners that can scan in and make electronic copies and put it on a CD. You can get now for about $35. And you can scan in pictures, you can scan in letters, you can scan in certainly all of the little notebooks. All that stuff can be put on a disc. Now the disc wears out in about 60,000 years. So, but all that stuff can be preserved, and you certainly don't need the space that you'd need for the pictures and the notebooks and the letters, and since you do things and you have little projects, this could certainly be a project for in the winter time when the weather isn't as clement, and you want to feel like you're accomplishing something, and you could once you scan them all in, I'd be glad to burn CDs for you and put a nice picture on the CD that says Paul Kuhn's mother so and so such a year, and these were the letters that he wrote to his mother, and then people could read them at their leisure and take from them what they will.
Another thing I guess I would want to preserve, I've kept a daily diary for years and years, and I've been writing poems for years and years, between 200 and 300 I guess now, and I would like to preserve the poems especially. They reflect a lot of my personal philosophy and my beliefs, and I guess the diaries pretty much is a history of what happens day after day. In fact, in my diary for today is a note right in the very top of the page, 6 o'clock, be with Dan. It's a daily record of things that happen that stand out in my mind. I guess my poems in my diary, and there's V-mail letters to my mother. I would enjoy those material things like my guitars. They can replace those. Clothing, cameras. That's just material things.
Sure. The house can certainly be made
yes, better. Right.
You might make some changes. You might make rooms bigger or smaller,
Yeah.
or spread them out and have everything in one floor so there are no stairs.
That was Mary Ann's thought for the last couple of years. She says,
Well, don't tell her I mentioned it, or she'll decide she wants 2 flights of stairs to go up.
yeah. She says, why don't we move into a cottage, one story, so we don't have steps. I says, well, Mary Ann, we don't have any trouble getting up steps now. She said, yeah, but how about years to come? Well, anyway, I am satisfied with living in that old house as long as we can get by. And there again, we're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. It's an old house. As long as the roof keeps the water out and the storm water doesn't flood the basement, we have a place to sleep. We have a spare bedroom for company that might come. In fact, Julie and her husband, well, Julie Ann will be here for a month from Germany or Persian Gulf. Maybe the war will be over there by July. April, May, June, July. Doubtful, but anyway, yes.
You never know.
You never know. But anyway, yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground in this interview, and there's certainly, I tried to, the best I could, ask, I think, the questions that perhaps maybe not your immediate family or your children would be interested in, but maybe Sammy, when Sammy's 35 or 40 years old, and he has some children that are teenagers, and they're saying, well, what do you know about, the people that came before us? And he might tell stories of an old 92-year-old guy that played the saw with
Yeah.
the bow. With me, my plans are very simple. I want to be shot by a jealous husband when I'm 92. If you think through the implications of that,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
probably means that I've also lived a very good, healthy life at 92. I only intend to start that behavior
Yeah.
at 92 as well.
Yeah.
Got to cover all my bases here. But we certainly have covered a lot. If there's anything that you can think of, a subject that should have come up and
I
you'd
think
like
of
to
your
talk about.
your grandson. I would hope that Des, you and Paul and Ken, if he's back with the family, would consider the possibility of the benefits that Sammy might get by being a Boy Scout. I was involved with Cub Scouting, Boy Scouting, and I was involved with Senior Scouts. I used to take my Senior Scouts to the Camp Hidden Valley, Camp for the Blind, at work parties. Many times I did that when I was a teacher and working with the Scouts. And the philosophy of the Scouting program, Lord Baden-Powell, the Englishman, started Boy Scouting, and their motto is "Be prepared," and their slogan, "Do a good turn daily." And the 12 points of the Scout Law. If Sammy would just learn those 12 words, a Scout is trustworthy, he's loyal, he's helpful, he's friendly, he's courteous, he's kind, he's obedient, he's cheerful, he's thrifty, he's brave, he's clean and reverent. Just those words, to reflect upon their meaning, I think would be part of the character building in a young man, a boy. I can see a great value there. On my honor, I would do my best to do my duty to God and my country and to obey the Scout Law, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. Morally straight. Just in those few things, there's such a wealth of goodness that a little boy could grow into, and into manhood. Here, I'm almost 80 years old, and they still stick with me from many years ago. When I was in college at Shippensburg, the president of the college knew I was active with scouting, and he wanted to go on vacation for about a week, and he picked me out of all the people, the brainy people he could have picked. He says, Paul, would you consider staying in my house while I'm on vacation, bringing in the mail and so forth? And I was thrilled. The president of the college had me live in his home while he was gone for a week. Reflecting back, that scouting might have had something to do with that.
I'm sure it
He
did.
was able to trust me. That was another feather in my hat, so to speak, for which I'm grateful. That I earned the trust of the highest ranking guy in that whole college. He's the president of the whole outfit, Shippensburg College. It used to be a 2-year normal school, and then it became a 4-year school. I don't know whether they issue doctor's degrees now. It would be Shippensburg State University if it were. I should keep in touch with them. But as these colleges develop, they eventually become universities, and when they become universities, they can issue doctor's degrees. I don't know if I told you, one of my thrills was to learn that Shippensburg University wanted something historical about the beginning of education, and they discovered just north of Shippensburg, where I taught school, my first school, half a year, they picked out that building, they bought the building, had it trucked in to the campus, and it's parked there as a historical, the very school I started teaching in, from January to the end of school in 1949. I haven't seen it yet. Fairview School, Hopewell Township, Cumberland County, is where it was located. And when I heard about it, I says, I'm thrilled. That's where I started teaching. So that I want to go back sometime and see that old building.
So if indeed, when we pass over, if indeed they're all waiting there to greet us,
That means the two of us. Greet us.
when you do, who would you like to someone obviously that's already there, who would you like to come and greet you? And show you around.
I guess my grandfather on my mother's side, he was a carpenter by trade. He was a bootlegger before Franklin Roosevelt came into office. But I never saw him beat his wife. I don't remember ever hearing him curse or swear at her. 17 children he fathered. I guess he never went farther than grade school, but yet he was a craftsman. As you are an expert in electronics, he was an expert in building houses. He and the neighbor for whom he worked, they went around building people's houses. That was their trade, and I always was thrilled. When I get my musical saws out, I should think of my grandfather, Harvey Stokes Beamer. Stokes. I think that's the correct middle name, Harvey Stokes Beamer. Stokes might have been a family name way back.
Kind of like my grandfather, Robert Brubaker, for two.
Yeah,
See, and I've kind of impressed on my children. It didn't work with Sammy as much as they went for the Samuel Allen Mintz, so his name would spell his name S-A-M. But I've always felt that the Europeans, the reason for the middle name was for heritage. And now Desiree has since, when she had her name changed when she got married, her name is now Desiree Modich Mintz. Had I had the wisdom when I got married, I would have convinced my wife to change her name to Paula Kuhn Modich. But you don't think of these things. I would have, I guess, men have the same right as a woman to change their name when they get,
I would think so.
when they get married.
Yeah.
And I would have changed my name to Daniel Ritu Modich.
Mm-hmm.
This Billy Joe and Bobby Jean and whatever they come up with.
Doesn't have as much meaning.
Yeah, I don't think the middle name was ever intended to be something flashy or tricky. It was intended for to carry the namesake, so that when people saw your name on your driver's license or an application, there was certainly a way to say, oh, your mother was a Ritu, or your father was a Kuhn, or to keep that heritage. Instead of, I think they somewhere along the line over here we got dependent on the male of the family carrying on the name, and it didn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of silly what we do. That's my humble opinion. But Desiree did that when she got married.
I think it's a good idea.
And I would imagine my son would probably, do that with his children. His children would probably be their first name and then their mother's is maiden name, and then the Modich, which I think is appropriate.
You're mentioning this brings me back to my high school days. I learned about George Washington Carver. He was a black scientist.
Yep.
And
I think he was involved with peanuts.
yeah, a great scientist in developing plant knowledge about plants. He wanted to do something great, and someone challenged him and says, "How many things can you make from the peanut plant?" I think it may have evolved into that sort of thing, and he astounded his friends. And
I think
George Washington Carver.
I was told that they came up with a process using peanuts that they were able to roast them to a certain degree, and they produced a liquor, not alcoholic liquor, but like chocolate liquor as an example.
Yes.
They produced a liquor that was very similar to chocolate, that for some reason they never let them capitalize on. Supposedly it was a very flavorful candy they thought that would be as addictive as chocolate. But because there were certain people that supposedly had money in the cocoa bean and all that, they never let it go forward, and I think he had his hand in that. If the story is true. And I heard that from a PhD by the name of Clyde Young, who taught in the University of Virginia, who would come around to, like our plan is that he gave courses in peanut technology, and all the different varieties of peanuts, long runners and short runners, and what they're used for, and which are more flavorful, and the aflatoxins and the different things that was all about peanuts.
Gee, the Hershey candy bar could have partly been made with peanuts then, or the liquor obtained from the peanut.
The coating, what we know as chocolate, I don't know what they would call it, but supposedly there was a process in. My understanding is that they almost would burn the peanut, and when they got it to that special point and they processed it, they felt that it was as delightful as chocolate itself.
Is this how you learned about George Washington Carver? From this fellow?
A little bit. Certainly there's been, from the 60s on, that I think any person person who was black and had any accomplishments was certainly more
Yeah.
embellished than it.
Yeah. Well, when you started talking about it, I thought of George Washington Carver. And I learned about him first when I was in high school. His name was, he was alive then, I believe, when I was a kid in high school, in his late 30s and early 40s. George Washington Carver. Gee, I haven't read about him for ages. He was one of the greats. That's interesting, Daniel.
Well, I hope you've had a good time doing this.
Yeah. I don't know if you can put it all together in something.
Some kind of organized fashion.
Yeah.
Some people might just want a copy of the raw footage one day.
I admire your ability to do this. Your knowledge of computers and what you can do and storing information, communication that's available. This boggles my mind. I know we have a fairly good computer, but learning how to use it, that would be a challenge.
Your daughter and my wife overheard some of, I guess, in some of the evenings that we were doing this interview, she heard me asking you different questions and going through, and the other night she came to me, she said, she says, I was thinking, she says, I really like what you were doing. She said, I think you could do that as a business. I think people would like to have a tape like that done, professionally.
It would be an electronic biography
Yeah.
of people, an electronic biography.
Something that they could let behind. They wouldn't necessarily have to let anybody know that they've done it.
Yes.
It could be in their safety deposit box.
Mhm.
Some of the questions that they might want to be asked, or they might just go with more of the generic questions.
I was interested how you arrived at the various questions you had written down. You certainly were thinking about it.
I bought a program. I saw a program, and it was a piece of software that was for $5. And it was in a big tin, and it is meant to be done strictly on the computer, and kind of everything typed out, and maybe scanning some pictures in, and then using some live footage. But I thought, I read through a lot of it showed a family tree, for instance. You built a family tree, and then you put pictures in the family tree, and then there was scads of different questions and different topics, and then this all gets built and interwoven into this program, and I could see where it was a process that was so tedious and time-consuming that for an individual to do it like it would just be overbearing. You'd have to really be into this. So what I did is I went through and I tried to pick out what I thought the questions that somebody want to sit back and want to know about this person that had something to do with their makeup. What Sammy's kids would find interesting, and the different things that you did, or they might have traits of their own, and they'd say, well, I think that's where I get it. I never felt that I needed to give a guy a swift kick in the ass or punch him in the mouth to get my point across.
Yeah. Well, those were thought-provoking questions. I enjoyed that, Daniel.
Well, you did well. You were very easy to interview because I just had to wind you up, and you just kept going like the Energizer Bunny. You didn't make it difficult for me. You didn't say like 3 words, and now you were waiting for me to ask the next question. You rolled along with it. Sometimes you didn't always give me the answer to the question that I asked, and that was okay. And I would come back and circle around and say, now, let me ask it in a different way. So they might accuse us of giving them more information than they ever wanted.
Yeah.
say, if I edit it out and make it something kind of short and sweet, and put some music to the as you're speaking, sometimes certain background music. There's one song in particular, because I'm going to do my father as well, and my mother, and if your wife, if she, depending what mood she's in, she might agree to it, she might not. It's strictly up to her. Roy Clark, he sings a song, Yesterday When I Was Young.
Mm.
And I think when you get to a certain point in your life and you listen to the song and you listen to the words, and I don't know, it's appropriate. It seems to, it fits. I don't know if you ever heard the song.
I know of Roy Clark, but I don't know particularly of the song.
Yesterday when I was young, there were so many songs waiting to be sung, and then the words go on, and he talks about how he went after life, and how when he was young he thought that he'd have all the time, and then he talks about how how life unfolds, and then you realize that it wasn't just a dress rehearsal; it was the real thing all along. He doesn't use those words.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's in a film like this, when you're editing and putting in certain things like that, it can certainly be heart wrenching, to say the very least. So, I don't know if you ever saw the film I did for my father, and it was we went to where he had his horse one day, and I did a lot of filming, and then I edited it and put music in, and he still will get this tape out a couple times a year and go down to his
Really?
bedroom and watch it. It's a lot of work. I probably had 80 hours in it.
Really?
Oh yeah, that's the kind of, well, when you're a one-man show, that's the kind of effort that goes into making something like that. The pieces fit, you get the right, you have to view it. In other words, all the time that we've spent here, you'd have to view it all. Then you have to capture just the right pieces and where they fit and how they go, along with the appropriate music. And then you add other things, you add some other things in, other things that are available. For instance, I have a whole horde of different pictures, and as you talk about people, I mean, you can say Paula and Verna and Dwight. I have certain pictures of all those people.
Well, that's interesting, Daniel. This is a first for me. I've never had anybody sit down and try to span from the beginning of my recollection up to almost 80 years. That's pretty much a lifetime. A lot of people don't live that long. Again, I'm grateful. Not just for the fact that I lived that long, but the opportunities that were available for me to do something outside of myself. Like I said, it's what you can give. And a better world. I challenge you to continue thinking about that, Daniel. A better world. A better Hershey Foods. A better anything. How can we make things better? I did tell you one of my other special projects is collecting all the ideas I can get about living healthier longer. As long as I have the energy.
Well, you need to watch that Dr. Wallach tape again.
Yes.
Because he truly believes that the lifespan of man is probably 140 without any enhancements. Could be longer than that. And he has records of some people that have lived, longer than that. That they had kids that were 80 and still didn't decide which college they wanted to go.
Up in
Fathered children in his 80s, I think this guy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And he's convinced that, you know, with the right vitamin supplements and the right nutrition, and unfortunately not the nutrition that we've been taught.
I think of you and Paul are taking glucosamine for cartilage maintenance, or
It seems to help. I think I've noticed maybe 2 years ago, occasionally I would notice being on concrete floors all day and going out to the job sites and stuff, twinges in my knees. Not what I would call an ongoing pain that I couldn't bear, but I noticed it. And then maybe the next day when I'd get up, you know, it might have taken a couple minutes till I got kind of lubed up, and it, you know, kind of twinged for a little as I got up. And I think since I've been doing this, I know that I haven't noticed it. How's that?
yeah. So many people, the elderly, are getting knee replacements,
For
hip
me?
joints replacements.
Who is it?
George Long.
Oh, okay. Old Georgie.